Joe Mixon might be a league winner in 2024. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we have to talk about this Monday Night Football game, I guess, Kate, I suppose.
Rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah, let's talk about Houston first, so I'm not immediately sad to start the show. A lot of great things from Houston on offense in this one. Nico Collins is back, 4 for 54, but could have been an even bigger day. He had a 70-yard touchdown on the very first play of the game that was called back. Tank Dell, 4 for 54 as well on 7 targets. He had a couple plays called back as well. But the story here is Joe Mixon. 20 carries for 109 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also had 2 catches for 44 yards. Could he be a league winner for you this season?
There's absolutely no doubt. Like Joe Mixon is having what I think is the best season of his career by a decent mile. I know he had a pretty good 2021 campaign, but like even then, it took him 368 rush attempts to get to 1,400 rushing yards. I still think this is a better version of Joe Mixon than we have ever seen at this point in his career. Looks so explosive. Getting yards after contact behind an offensive line that has struggled to this point in the season. It's kind of funny because you look at the advanced metrics like missed forced tackle rate, yards per carry, like they don't actually match his career bests. First down touchdown percentage, like they don't match his career best. He's actually averaging the highest stuff rate of his career. And yet I'm still watching the tape and I'm saying this is the best football Joe Mixon has ever played in the NFL. And if you have him on your roster, congratulations. Like I have Joe Mixon on one of my dynasty rosters, and it was one of these teams that literally I said, after this week, I'm going to make the decision, tear it down, rebuild, or I'm going to go for the ship. And I have Joe Mixon on my team. So he might be edging me toward, going in, throwing in a couple of extra assets at, some depth pieces to make this playoff push, because I do think he's going to be a league winner with the way that the Texans want to play football right now.
So I agree with you. Like he's playing some of the best football of his career. And you look at the next 3 games that Houston has: home Tennessee, at Jacksonville, home Miami. Like those are all smash spots for him. One of the reasons why maybe I'm a little bit more bearish on the idea that he could help you win your leagues is you look at the final 2 weeks of the playoffs, Kate, at Kansas City, and then 4 days later, home against Baltimore, 2 of the best run defenses in the NFL. Maybe it won't matter because he's getting all the short yardage work and he can save you with touchdowns and he can save you with receptions, but that's not the best spot to be in for a running back as we get later into the season. So I do think he's going to help you get to the playoffs over the next couple of games, but I am a little bit concerned about the playoff matchups.
Here's the one thing that I'm kind of hanging my hat on, though, for this, Houston Texans team right now is that their defense is playing well enough and generating enough turnovers that sometimes that can shorten the field in a big, big way that, can set you up much closer to the goal line than you probably would have envisioned. So like I'm looking at those 2 matchups. Yes, they're the 2 toughest matchups for fantasy running backs to face this year. stifling in terms of pretty much every rushing metric you can look at. But you always have to put that into the context of, okay, you know, how does this team want to play football? They want to run it down your throats. And the way that Joe Mixon has been playing this year, I do think like, yeah, you continue to give him carries, wear down the defenses. He remains explosive. Like from a game script perspective, it doesn't seem ideal, but I also think that the way that their offense or their defense is generating turnovers right now, like I think their defense looks a little bit better than even the stat sheet would indicate here. I'm not as scared. I'm very excited to have Joe Mixon on my teams despite those two challenging matchups.
I want to talk about CJ Stroud really quickly, Kate, because this was another game where if you had CJ Stroud in your starting lineup, you were disappointed. Really, really struggled in this game, despite the Texans scoring 34 points. We should mention that 7 of those points came on a fumble that they returned for a touchdown. On defense, the offense was like did nothing in the second and third quarter of this game. CJ Stroud finished the game 23 of 34 for 257 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. He had multiple other plays in this game that could have been intercepted. Right before halftime, he threw a ball to Josh Butler that was dropped on the sideline, a Cowboys defensive back. How concerned are you about CJ Stroud now that it's just another one of these kind of stinker performances?
I mean, this was the concern all along for CJ Stroud. We've seen him a little bit more willing to, scramble this year, and I think part of that is because of the struggles of their offensive line right now. But it just feels like nothing looks particularly easy for CJ Stroud right now, and that's, I think, just kind of a testament to where they're at with the offense. But I also want to counter the point that, like, much like Nico Collins, if that 80-yard touchdown had gone to the house,
Yeah,
we'd probably be having a different conversation. And I do think that it's always unfortunate when those nullified plays happen on the first play of the game, because guess what? It feels like you don't get as much out from that player for the remainder of the game because, yeah, an 80-yard house call gasses you out just a little bit.
you're right. At the same time, it's like, again, I'm a Cowboy fan. I'm looking at the Cowboys defense. They started a cornerback that they signed off the street to play on the outside against Nico Collins like 4 days ago. Their starting slot corner in this game was a 6'4" safety who had never started a game in his NFL career. The Cowboys defensive line had one player that could create pressure and some really bad linebacker play. Like, this should be a game where CJ Stroud goes crazy, and he doesn't. Now, granted, they did score 3 short rushing touchdowns, but I think when you're just watching this game, it didn't feel like Stroud was having a dominant game, and he
No.
was it. And I think that's the concern, is that we've had several of these games right away. What's going to happen once the Texans start playing some better defenses? Because you look at their last few weeks, playing the Jets, who we've now seen the Jets have a horrible defense, right? The Colts have a bad defense. They've really struggled in a lot of these games. He did not play well in the Detroit game at all. The defense forced 5 turnovers in that game, and they still were unable to score the ball. I have some real concerns about CJ Stroud, not as a NFL player, but as a fantasy asset. And Kate, right now in Dynasty League football, we saw his ADP up to like quarterback 5 at one point this summer. It's down to QB 10 right now. And I got to believe once we get to the December ADP, it's going to be even lower than that.
I mean, efficiency is down across the board for CJ Stroud. We've seen him see a drop in his touchdown percentage, an increase in his interception rate, a decrease in passing yards per game, decrease in completion percentage, decrease in passer rating. Like, everything is down across the board. I do still want to point out, like, even in a matchup where, yeah, like, the box score is so deceiving because, like, this was a much closer game than a 34-10 final score would ever have indicated. But I still, like, I'm looking at, Nico Collins. So yeah, like, he started off the game with that touchdown that was called back. And then guess what? He played 47% of offensive snaps. He was not fully available to this team in week 1. Tank Dell, I think, has looked better, but again, like some penalties continue to nullify. And I still don't even know if he's 100% healthy as of this time. Like there's a few things that feel off about this offense, but I'm still wondering if this is going to be a team that we see surge here in the fantasy playoffs, because they do get healthier. And what needs to happen for that to come to fruition? They need to stop like shooting themselves in the foot with penalties. Will they clean those up? I don't know. But I do think that some of the struggles that we're seeing are due to health. Not all in on CJ Stroud. We've already kind of shared our concerns about his viability as a fantasy quarterback due to a lack of rushing upside. But let's say the wide receiver core gets a little bit healthier. The offensive line still sucks. Maybe we still get a nice little blend of a boost in passing efficiency plus some extra yardage from scrambling. That hasn't typically been the pinnacle of Stroud's career. I think this might just be a buy low opportunity on all of the Texans passing and receiving options, because I still I believe in the skill.
I would buy the weapons. I wouldn't buy the quarterback in dynasty leagues. I just think Stroud is a really good NFL quarterback. He's not a great fantasy quarterback. So I'm kind of out on CJ Stroud. Not completely in dynasty leagues, but I'm not paying.
If he's your QB2 though, I think like
but he's not being valued as that right now. He's still being valued as a low end QB1. And you look at some of the names that are going behind him, like I would just rather have Justin Herbert than CJ Stroud right now.
See, and I think that's one of these things that, like, looking at the ADP, I feel like if we pulled right now in this very moment and we didn't have cumulative data from like earlier in the month, like I think Justin Herbert would probably be well ahead of CJ Stroud. I like if we were doing a dynasty startup right now with, 10 other everydayers here, I think Justin Herbert would go ahead of CJ Stroud right now. But again, like for as much as we want to brag that dynasty is like this long-term game, we're still all very reactionary. So
well, one of these quarterbacks is running and the other one is not. So I think that certainly helps. Okay, let's talk. Oh gosh, about the Dallas Cowboys. I suppose we have to do it. Let's talk about what we should make of the rest of this Cowboys offense for the remainder of the 2024 season next. This episode is brought to you by Zbiotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Again, here's how you use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol for best results. Make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is back with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Kate, we have to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. 10 points in this game, all of it which came in the second quarter. What do we do with this Cowboys offense where they're pretty clear that Cooper Rush is going to be the starting quarterback going forward? I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. The Cowboys lost both of their starting guards in this game, Tyler Smith and Zach Martin to injury. They lost their starting left tackle, Tyler Guyton, to injury. Jake Ferguson left the game with a concussion. What do we do with this Cowboys offense?
I think you just got to wait it out. Like, there's nothing from a dynasty perspective. I'm looking at this team and I'm like, what action items do I have in response to the state of their franchise? And I can't come up with anything. Like, I don't really think you can still buy low on CeeDee Lamb. Like, I don't know if maybe you can leverage a trade for CeeDee Lamb if you're in a rebuild and maybe you have an asset that is going to be a little bit more useful to a contending team right now. Maybe that is the action item, but like, that's so specific to certain leagues. Like, I'm not going in to trade for anybody. I think you just wait. If you have Cowboys, you wait. If you want to acquire Cowboys, you're probably waiting, because I don't think the trade market is going to be amenable to making a ton of moves.
And the only guy that you're really acquiring that has a long-term future in Dallas is CeeDee Lamb, because he is the number one receiver who signed a long-term extension. Jake Ferguson is going to be on the final year of his rookie deal in 2025. Rico Dowdle is a free agent after this year. Jalen Tolbert is a free agent after the 2025 season. What else are you going to do? Now, I will say one of the moves that I would consider, like if you want to go out and get CeeDee Lamb, is, let's say you have A.J. Brown on your team, who is a similar asset but being valued behind CeeDee Lamb. I could see a trade that makes sense of, hey, I'm sending away my A.J. Brown to a contender for CeeDee Lamb, because I know CeeDee's going to put up numbers, but not the numbers that we're used to seeing from him. So trades like that make sense, but I think you're right. Like, there's nothing else in this offense that you need to be doing. There's no actionable moves that are out there right now. I think you just have to wait it out.
And I'm sorry. Like, I hate to do this to you, Marcus, Mr. Locked On Cowboys himself. But like, if you, the Locked On Cowboys co-host, can't come up with any, flavorful moves for us to make, I think that tells you where we're at with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, like Cooper Rush,
the other thing is,
I don't even think he could offer you like depth at the quarterback position in a 2 QB league. Like, that touchdown to Kevontae Turpin, like, doesn't even belong in the stat sheet column for Cooper Rush in all reality here. Like, I think this is a wash. And I guess the only question for me is, like, Dak Prescott in the future. What does his dynasty value look like for a team who's rebuilding? Like, is he a guy that's worth trading for? I don't even know, because it's so hard to envision the state of the offense moving forward.
Well, and it's hard. There's a couple different reasons for that, right? I mean, Dak is coming off yet another major surgery. We also don't know what the offense is going to look like next year, because we don't know who's going to be calling plays, right? Like, if it's Ben Johnson, who's the Cowboys' new head coach, which I think is a pipe dream, I think we get really excited about what Dak could do with a Ben Johnson offense. If it's Bill Belichick coaching the team and it's Joe Judge running the offense, I'm not excited at all. Like, I'm right back to not caring about this Cowboys offense. And obviously there's a lot of room between those two coaches, right? Like, there's just to be clear. But I think this is just all a hold with Dak until we know, okay, first of all, who is he throwing to? Do they upgrade the number 2 receiver position? Who's coaching them? Who's on the offensive line? Does Zach Martin retire? Do they upgrade that unit? I think, again, you just have to wait this thing out.
Give us some insight. Is this the down baddest that the Cowboys have been since when?
I mean, it's been a long time. I think some of those years in like the early 2000s where they were 5-11, 3 straight years and didn't have any first round picks was pretty bleak, and they didn't have a franchise quarterback. But yeah, this is rough. I was joking last night that this had preseason game number 3 vibes out there. And listen, there was a play in the third quarter of this game where your backfield was Cooper Rush, Princeton Fant, and Deuce Vaughn, and he was throwing to Jonathan Mingo, Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Spanford, and Ryan Flournoy. Like, it's not an NFL team. Like, this is what you see in the third week of the preseason. They've been decimated by injuries. They're not very good. They don't have a lot of depth. Just have 7 more games, Kate. 7 more games.
All right. Yeah. End it quickly, please.
For our sake. All right. We actually had some big news coming out of the NFL on Monday. Daniel Jones was not only benched, but he was demoted all the way down to QB3 in favor of Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets. We'll talk about the dynasty ramifications of that next. This episode is brought to you by Bilt. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. You can use your points to jet off on a dream vacation, put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay with over 500 airlines and over 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use the points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment, and so much more. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That is JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. And make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you. Join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show with Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins. Probably the only other 2 Locked On hosts that know what I'm having to suffer through right now. Go listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. Again, 2 shows every single day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, available on YouTube as well. All right, Kay, let's talk about Daniel Jones, who was demoted from QB1 to QB3 by Brian Dable on Monday. This is pretty clearly a salary cap move because they don't want Daniel Jones to get hurt, which would guarantee his 2025 salary. This effectively tells us that the Giants are moving on from Daniel Jones. They'll have a new quarterback in 2025. For the short term, how much do you think this is going to impact players like Tyrone Tracy, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, and the rest of the offense?
I mean, you look at, like, for example, their accuracy metrics, things of that nature. And, like, let's be honest, Tommy DeVito has not been any better than Daniel Jones. Like, and I think that is, like, just a testament to the fact that, yeah, this is not necessarily a move that they think they're suddenly going to be winning football games with Tommy DeVito. Like, I think he's just the popular option, right? Like, win a little bit of fan favoritism because, he's got a fun story. But you look at Daniel Jones, he's got a higher accurate throw rate, a higher plus throw rate, a lower uncatchable inaccurate throw rate. So, like, are we trying to come up with the idea that this would be a good move for Malik Neighbors? Because I don't think this is any better for Malik Neighbors than Daniel Jones. I think this is like a net neutral move.
I don't see how it hurts Neighbors, but I really don't see how it helps them. Now, DeVito, I think, is likely to move around a little bit. We saw that he was pretty good at throwing in the middle of the field, so maybe this is more opportunities for Wan'Dale Robinson. But no, I think much like Dallas, you're just waiting this season out to see who the quarterback is for Malik Neighbors next year. One of the questions I had for you, Kate, is do we think the Giants will be drafting a quarterback, or do you think they're going to be one of the teams in the market for like a veteran quarterback just to try to stable the ship a little bit?
I mean, let's start by looking at the draft class, right? So, like, there are several top quarterbacks that could be in contention. Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers. Give me some names.
We've got Shedeur
Carson Beck,
Sanders,
but
Cam
who's
Ward.
following?
Yeah,
I don't think
it's not
this
a
is like
great
a
quarterback class.
quarterback. Yeah, I don't know. So, like, when I'm looking at it from that perspective, I'm like, could they draft a quarterback in round 1? Probably. Do I think that that would be the like franchise changing move that they need? Probably not. So, like, where does that leave them? I don't know. But I don't really think they have many great options no matter where they look. So honestly, if I'm like trying to realistically project the New York Giants, this feels like a year where maybe you try to address all of the holes, right? Try to address everything and then see where you end up. And figure out quarterback, figure out all of that later, because I don't like they have a great defense right now. Like, they are trending up on defense. And I'm looking at even the options available in free agency. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with Justin Fields, but I don't know that he's the answer. Sam Darnold going to be a free agent. I don't know that they have the right system for a Sam Darnold. Like, I don't know.
That's going to be my thing is, do we think Brian Daboll is the coach next year for the Giants? Because I think I'm becoming increasingly, I think there's a good chance. Let me just say this. I think there's a good chance that they move on from Daboll and they move on from Joe Shane, their GM, and it's just a complete turnover. New GM, new head coach, new quarterback, because this clearly isn't working. And do we want Joe Shane to pick another quarterback? Do we want Brian Daboll to try to work with somebody else? I don't know. But I think if you're Malik Neighbors, I don't want to say that it could get worse, because it could. We've seen some other situations around the league where it's not great, but it can't get much worse, right? So I think if you are a Malik Neighbors dynasty manager, I think what you're actually hoping for is a veteran. And maybe it's Sam Darnold. Maybe it's Gardner Minshew. Somebody like that can come in and just give you some stable quarterback play. But I think the Giants have got to find their answer at quarterback, or they have no future at all.
I mean, it's very tricky, because I do think like I don't know. I'm looking at, Brian Daboll and the situation with Brian Daboll and the fact that he has spent his entirety of his career as the head coach for the New York Giants, coaching a Daniel Jones led team. And I don't know, like, if you are ownership and you're looking at, what Brian Daboll has done for culture, like, you look at the defense, right? The defensive side of the ball, you've got to be pretty happy with the way that they've kind of built up that defense. Like getting pressure, getting to the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that side of the ball, you could see the bright spots. But I do think, like, you look at Malik Neighbors, you could see the bright spot there. There are certain spots that you can understand why you might keep a Brian Daboll around, and maybe you give him a chance to coach a quarterback who's not Daniel Jones, right? Like, that's my only question is, does he get like a bridge year where he gets to coach anybody but Daniel Jones? Maybe. But I also don't know that there are any quarterbacks that are going to shift the trajectory of this offense from the jump. Like, if it's going to be a rookie, I feel like they're kind of committing to Brian Daboll for a couple more years.
And that's what's scary is, do you want to commit to Brian Daboll for 3 more years?
I don't think so. And then I'm looking at like free agents, and like, is Sam Darnold the guy that's going to save Brian Daboll's career? Maybe not. So like, yeah, maybe that is the front office's signal. Like, let's just scrap and start anew. But either way,
it's not great.
I don't know. Like let's picture like a Ben Johnson coming into this situation, right? Like, if Ben Johnson is the head coach of the New York Giants, I could suddenly see a kind of shift, a turnaround, and they become an offense that maybe isn't so quarterback centric, where you have Malik Neighbors as this elite wide receiver one, and you set him up for success by establishing the run. Maybe you can kind of mask an offense with a Sam Darnold. I don't know. There are so many ways that they can go. And if somebody's freaking out about the trajectory of this offense and I can get Malik Neighbors for 99 cents on a dollar, I'm doing it.
Malik Neighbors, he's the 4th overall player in startup dynasty leagues, startup dynasty drafts, just behind Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase going into the month of November. So yeah, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny for Malik Neighbors, and you understand why. Special talent. I've got to believe sooner rather than later, they'll at least get some competent cornerback play. Maybe it's Tommy Cutlets. Maybe Tommy Cutlets comes into the next couple of weeks and lights it up and gives us something fun to watch, but I have my doubts. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll see you right back here on Wednesday with Matt Williamson.